Well, I would hate to see you go on any kind of sloped roofs that are, at a 20, 25, maybe 30-degree angle. I mean, that's not safe, okay? Don't do that. There's my public service announcement at 6:05 on a Wednesday morning on KCMO 95.7 FM. It's great to be here. Thanks for joining us on the show as always. Are you buying any of this? From the head of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle. This is the lamest excuse that you could ever come up with. If you are the head of the Secret Service and you are in charge of keeping former President and GOP nominee Donald Trump safe. The big question everybody's been asking since Saturday, how does a random guy end up on a roof 148 yards out from Donald Trump's head with a clear shot at the former president? How does that happen? Well, according to Kimberly Cheadle, Secret Service director, she addressed one of these central mysteries. People wondering what's going on. Reports saying that snipers are in the building that this guy Crooks is climbing up the side of and getting on the roof of. Well, she told ABC News yesterday the building has a sloped roof at its highest point. So there's a safety factor that would be considered there that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. She added the decision was made to secure the building from the inside. Yeah, it was so sloped that anybody could just walk up the ladder on the side of the roof and then walk to the edge of the slope, which wasn't all that sloped. I mean, we're not talking about a 45-degree pitch on this thing. You've seen the roof, right? I mean, we've all seen the videos at this point. The slope is at like maybe a 20-degree angle. Maybe.
I think the slope on the one right behind Trump was more steep.
Yes, with the snipers on it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that was far more steep than the slope that the shooter was on. So it was such a, I didn't know what she was going to say, this head of the Secret Service, Cheadle, who, by the way, should have resigned yesterday, or should have resigned Sunday. But, of course, nobody ever resigns in this administration. 13 American troops get killed in Afghanistan. Nobody resigns, including a Missouri kid. Nobody resigns. So why would she ever resign? Michael Austin didn't. So many others didn't. Why is she going to go anywhere? That being said, last night, Dan Bongino, who was on KCMO every afternoon at 12 o'clock, 12 to 2, you want to hear the Dan Bongino show. He's a former Secret Service agent himself. And he gave some insight during a podcast he did last night with Donald Trump Jr. and Tucker Carlson. Show is called Triggered, as I understand it. It's Don Jr.'s show. And listen to what Dan Bongino broke last night on this show. And you can hear Dan today at noon right here on 95.7 FM KCMO.
So I was just showing Tucker some material from an unimpeachable source, let's just say, on the matter. That post, according to my source, that roof was supposed to be a police post. It was supposed to be someone there. They're now making up excuses, saying the pitch of the roof. My source says to me no one knows why the post didn't show up. But so that's a nonsense story they're putting out in the media. And I was also told that the Secret Service director has been given instructions from the administration and the DHS secretary. If you want to keep your job, you'll keep your mouth shut about this. They're not putting that out there. But if you get those site post logs and those police instructions and there was a post on there and they didn't show up and no one checked, someone could have got your dad killed within millimeters.
That was Dan Bongino last night, and I'm sure he'll have plenty more on that today, 12 o'clock. Do not miss him during your lunch hour here on KCMO. That's exactly right. I mean, there's logs of all this, right? There's plans of all this that are written out, that are typed out, that are somewhere. If Dan is right, and I have no reason to believe that his reporting isn't accurate because it makes all the sense in the world that somebody was supposed to be monitoring that roof and that person did not show up, then that blows a massive hole in the Secret Service director's theory. Or not even a theory, her comment that nobody was going to be on the roof because the slope of the roof? It's basically flat. There was like a little pitch at the end as you walk up it. That is the most pathetic excuse I've ever heard in my life. And that ties back to, all right, what Dan is saying is a whole lot more plausible. Somebody was supposed to be there and didn't show up and nobody noticed, or I don't know what. I mean, massive, massive human error, a massive human failure is still what it comes down to. But the fact that nobody at this point is paying a price with their job is just stunning to me. So we're monitoring all that. And then these two items yesterday happened as well. First off, you had a man with an AK-47 pistol wearing a ski mask who we found out yesterday was arrested just blocks from where the Republican National Convention is being held in Milwaukee. That is what federal law enforcement officers were confirming to Fox News yesterday. They were conducting surveillance near the RNC perimeter. They noticed a suspicious man approaching. He was wearing a ski mask and carrying a tactical bag. Inside the bag, police found the gun and a full magazine. His intentions were unclear. And then you had this. 5 Ohio police officers who were in Milwaukee to assist with security at the RNC fired shots at a man in a residential neighborhood yesterday afternoon, killing this man. The man was holding a knife in each hand and charging at another person when officers from Columbus, Ohio intervened. And the shooting took place about a mile away from the location for the Republican National Convention. That investigation is underway. I'm not assuming anything in terms of, intentions, who these people are. We don't know. So I'm not suggesting, and I don't want anyone to misconstrue this at all, that somehow, the RNC is under attack. That's an unfair statement to make. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, with everybody being on high alert after what happened on Saturday, you then have these two incidents that took place over the last 36 hours, and they're at the very least notable, right? Who they are, what their motivations are, what happened in these two cases outside of the RNC over the last couple of days, we don't know. But they did happen, and you have massive amounts of security. We've got a lot of folks from Kansas and Missouri who are up there, either as delegates or just to kind of be a part of the show. And I've been reaching out and texting them the last couple of days, and they said this security, one person said to me, who's been to a Super Bowl, this feels even more restrictive than a Super Bowl when it comes to the level of security they have up there in Milwaukee. And it's only going to be ramped up because, of course, Donald Trump speaks tomorrow night. J.D. Vance will introduce himself to the nation tonight. We will carry both of those speeches right here on KCMO 95.7 FM. So we will carry RNC Night 3 and Night 4 starting at 8 p.m., 8 till 11. We'll have it here on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So just want to note that for you as well as we get towards the heavy hitters. Night 1 and Night 2 are good, but now you get to the bread and butter. So we're going to carry that tonight at 8 o'clock, and then tomorrow night when Trump speaks, also at 8 o'clock up until 11. So then what happened last night? Well, last night was very much about unification. Last night was very much about a party coming together, a party that 6 months ago was much more divided, but a party that is now the more united party of the two major political parties in this country. It's amazing what a few months will do. We'll tell you what happened and why next on KCMO. Well, all eyes are on Milwaukee, and the ratings have been actually pretty darn good across cable news outlets and even, your traditional media outlets. Fox News on Monday night hit a peak of 7 million viewers for the Republican National Convention. ABC in the second slot, 2.3 million. NBC at 2.2. So these are massive numbers. I mean, that right there, 7, 2.5. I mean, you're talking 12 million people right there on just those three networks, and that's not including CBS, MSNBC, CNN, News Nation, all those other channels. So there is tremendous amounts of attention, and that was Monday night. We don't have the ratings from last night yet when there were some bigger name speakers. But clearly there is a lot of attention across the political aisle and across the country on this Republican National Convention. I mean, nothing in this country gets 10 plus million viewers anymore. And really when you stack it all up, it's more like 15 to 20 million. NFL playoff games are the only things that get those kinds of numbers. And then maybe the Oscars on a good year will get a number like that. And the Grammys. That's it. So this is obviously not just, it's not getting into the weeds politically. It's like this is what people are watching on television this week. It's what they're talking about. Maybe not at work because you can't do that anymore, but you get the point. It's what has people's attention this week across America. And last night, the message was unity. Nikki Haley was the biggest critic on the national stage of Donald Trump in the same political party for the better part of pushing 8 to 10 months, right? From really last summer, after the 2022 midterms, Republicans start, picking up some steam, thinking about 24. Nikki Haley jumps into the race, and she was the fiercest critic of Donald Trump on the Republican side of the aisle. For those who were never Trump, Nikki Haley was your girl. Nikki Haley was your candidate. Well, Nikki Haley got on that stage last night. She was invited by Donald Trump, and this is, a recent development. She was invited by Donald Trump to speak at the Republican National Convention. And she was brutally honest. She talked about, not loving everything Trump says, not loving everything that he does. But she got down to the core message that I think is important for Kansas Cityans to hear and for Americans to hear. So let's roll Nikki Haley from last night at the RNC.
You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me. I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree. We agree on keeping America strong. We agree on keeping America safe. And we agree that Democrats have moved so far to the left that they're putting our freedoms in danger.
That was Nikki Haley last night. And what I was just as interested in is Trump's body language and facial expressions as she's giving this speech. Because let's be honest, the overwhelming majority of people up there are, kissing the ring, right? That's what they're doing. And that's totally fine. I mean, the guy's the nominee, so they can do what they want. I mean, that's kind of part of the job. But Nikki Haley got up there and she talked about disagreeing with Trump. She talked about not liking all of his tweets. Like, she did all of those things and more. And you could see it in Trump's facial expression. This was my read on it without being a body language expert. And what does that mean anyway? But I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, he's not totally comfortable. I mean, listen, Trump likes his ego to be stroked. He's not totally comfortable, but he accepted it. And he kind of had a smirk and, his arms were crossed. So maybe he wasn't fully comfortable, but he's nodding along and he's smiling and he's with it. And that's what matters. When you talk about unification of a party, that's the kind of stuff that matters and will make a difference. And in a race that still could be closer than, people want to admit it will be, having Nikki Haley get up there and say, listen, I'm supporting Donald Trump. Donald Trump has my endorsement, is how she opened up her speech last night. And here's why Donald Trump has my endorsement. She basically said elections are binary choices. One of these two guys is going to be running the country for the next 4 years. And Donald Trump, in her opinion, and for many of us, is a hell of a lot better option than the guy who's currently in the White House. And that's what Nikki Haley was getting across to not just the Republican National Convention, but the 10, 15, 20 million people who were watching last night. You have two options. That's the reality. Choose wisely. And then there was Ron DeSantis. Now, we know there is no love lost between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. At least there wasn't up until recently. But Trump, to his credit, does put Ron DeSantis up there, allow him to give one of the more primetime speeches, He wasn't the most prime time. That was Marco Rubio and Lara Trump, but he was pretty darn prime time. And he gets up there, and right out of the gates, DeSantis lets it rip. I mean, I've got the thing on while, Kate was getting ready for bed or whatever. She was kind of listening from afar, and she's like, where was that Ron DeSantis on the campaign trail? He came out just letting it rip. He was on fire.
My fellow Republicans, let's send Joe Biden back to his basement, and let's send Donald Trump back to the White House. Life was more affordable when Donald Trump was president. Our border was safer under the Trump administration, and our country was respected when Donald Trump was our commander-in-chief. Joe Biden has failed this nation. As a veteran, I was appalled when 13 of our service members were killed in Afghanistan due to Joe Biden's dereliction of duty. As a citizen, as a husband, and as a father, I am alarmed that the current president of the United States lacks the capability to discharge the duties of his office. Our enemies do not confine their designs to between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. We need a commander-in-chief who can lead 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. America cannot afford 4 more years of a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
And by the way, they panned to Trump, and Trump got a massive kick out of that. He genuinely was like belly laughing at that line. He got a laugh. I don't know if Trump likes the movie or what the deal is, but I hadn't really seen Trump laugh like that unexpectedly, maybe ever. So Ron just came out, fire and brimstone. He was rocking and rolling yesterday. And I'm telling you, Ron DeSantis is better when he doesn't have the political handlers all over him, making him overthink things. He just went out there and he just let it rip. So that was a big moment as well. And I saw some people on social media comparing that Ron DeSantis speech last night to Ronald Reagan at the 1976 RNC, which was right here in Kansas City, by the way, which, of course, led to eventually 1980 when Reagan became the nominee and then a 2-term president. So just do with that what you will. I wouldn't say DeSantis is the front runner right now. That's probably J.D. Vance, who was just tabbed the VP. But anyway, some people were making comparisons to Ronald Reagan 1976 here in Kansas City. News coming up in 2 minutes. We're back with you on the Kansas City Star endorsing in the Missouri governor's race. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? We'll get to it next. Can you let me know on the text line or on the phones at 913-408-7957 whether or not you care about endorsements from media outlets? I have never done an endorsement on this show in a primary because my thought is, well, obviously I have a lot of opinions. I do opinions 4 hours a day. But when it comes to candidates, kind of let you decide. I'll talk to all of them, or as many as I can. I'll talk about when they have good days and good moments and bad moments and smart answers and dumb answers. And, that part of it I will opine on. But I've never taken the approach of saying, this is who I'm standing behind. First off, I'll have my opinions, but they're not paying me, right? Why would I get involved in some kind of a primary race? Why would I do that? I'd rather have them all on the show and give them the platform to let you decide who you want to be your next fill in the blank. Governor, senator, congress member, whoever. That's been my approach for going on 7 years now. The Kansas City Star is still making endorsements, which is just insane to me. They're making endorsements, and they're doing it also in Republican primaries, as if anybody who votes in a Republican primary in Missouri or Kansas cares at all what the Kansas City Star thinks. There is not a Republican on the Kansas City Star editorial board. There isn't. They had one. His name was Michael Ryan. He left because it was such a disaster of a place to work. I mean, he literally felt like the redheaded stepchild on a good day. So let me get this straight. We're going to have a group of individuals on this Kansas City Star editorial board endorse in races and endorse in primaries of parties that nobody on the editorial board associates with, and who most people on the editorial board really just can't stand. That makes a lot of sense. That's good for business. So with that being said, the Kansas City Star made an endorsement in the Missouri governor's race in the Republican primary, and they endorsed Mike Kehoe, the current lieutenant governor. Something tells me that Mike Kehoe is not going to be going around in his new ads bragging about his endorsement from the Kansas City Star. In fact, he probably should call him up and tell him in hindsight he doesn't want it. I would not waste my time if I was Mike Kehoe with outlets like the Kansas City Star. But they did endorse Mike Kehoe for governor. And now my question to you is whether or not that moves the needle for you at all. If you actually become, in some ways, skeptical of somebody who the Kansas City Star endorsed. Now, let me be very clear. I think Mike Kehoe would be a very good governor for the state of Missouri. I do. I think all these guys, Jay Ashcroft, Bill Eigel, and Mike Kehoe, have their strong suits. If I could combine all three and turn them into one guy, that's what I would do in a perfect world for the state of Missouri, but obviously that's not possible. But they each have their strengths. But Kehoe, being a successful small businessman, knowing, a lot of the inner workings of Jeff City, which can be beneficial, and, being somebody who is just well-respected as a businessman is important. I see value in that. But I don't think Mike Kehoe is going to be running around the state of Missouri bragging about how he's got the endorsement of the Kansas City Star. But I could be proven wrong. 913-408-7957. That's the studio line and the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Streaming all morning long on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Mike is in Kansas City. Go ahead, Mike. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, I actually do take endorsements seriously, but for the opposite reason. Anybody the Kansas City Star endorses in general is somehow vote against, especially when you get into places like Johnson County where there's so little information. If somebody gets endorsed by the Kansas City Star, it usually means they're quite progressive, quite far left, and, we really don't want that. I believe there's somebody running for a prosecutor in Johnson County that's like a Gene Peters Baker protege, and, there's so little information on these people. So if the Star who researches them says to vote for them, usually means they're probably people that we really don't want in places of power.
Yeah, I totally. I understand that, Mike. Thank you. Now, I don't think Mike Kehoe is like that at all, but I get your point. Like, if the Star's endorsing them without knowing as much about the candidates, and, we're 3 weeks out, and this is really when people start paying attention to this stuff. It's why I stopped doing local political interviews unless there's big news involving a candidate or a person. We're mostly done with these interviews until we're inside of 30 to 40 days, because no one cares before that. People are living their lives. They're not caring about, their local election ballots until the final 30 days. Notice how the ads pick up on radio stations like ours and on TV and elsewhere in the last really 25 to 30 days of a campaign, because they know that's when the average person starts caring about this stuff. And that's what's going on right now. It's like cramming for your final exam. Everyone says, oh, yeah, I'm studying all semester. I'm going to keep up, and, I'm going to make sure I don't have to cram this time. Everyone's cramming. That's what's going on. And Mike's right. You don't know a ton about these people until it's sometimes the day of the election. But you know enough to say, well, if the Kansas City Star likes them, I'm probably good. I'm a good pass on that. Now, I'm not sure which candidate Mike was referring to there in the Johnson County prosecutor's race, but as soon as I find out something on that, I'll make sure that you know about it. I mean, Steve Howe is the incumbent in Johnson County, Kansas. He's done a very good job, and he should be the heavy frontrunner in that race. But, hey, it's Johnson County. You never know. And what you also don't know this year is how the top of the ticket could impact down ballot races. Will there be a lot of ticket splitting? Will more people vote for Donald Trump in Johnson County than did last time around, but then still vote for Sharice Davids? Or does that help the Republican nominee in the 3rd District of Kansas? Last time, the last Republican, Amanda Atkins, lost by double digits. And I know because, I will never live down that naked lap after that bad bet I made saying that Amanda Atkins would keep it within single digits, and she did not. But does the Republican actually get a boost because of what could happen at the top of the ticket with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, where Donald Trump could turn out voters in Miami and Franklin County, Kansas, that might typically not show up in a midterm because they're fired up, and that helps out whoever the Republican is against Sharice Davids. It's entirely possible. And then do maybe some swing voters in Johnson County who might have been Biden in 20 move back to Trump, and that helps the Republican down ballot. All those things are entirely possible. And it's fascinating to see how that's going to play out here in the weeks and months ahead. But, of course, that primary is 2.5 weeks away, a little less than 3, on Tuesday, August 6th. It's going to be here before we know it. We do have some information, by the way, on the worst national anthem of all time. This broke in the afternoon. It came down yesterday after we heard what I truly believe is the worst national anthem on a major stage in recent American sports history. What is the story with that individual? What happened to her? We'll tell you next on KCMO. Oh, man, I really still think this is just an awful national anthem, but I understand there is some sympathy now for what happened. First, if you did not hear it, let's take a listen 2 nights ago to the worst national anthem. I'm not going to play the whole thing again because I can't do that to your ears at 6:50 in the morning on a Wednesday. But Ingrid Andress, who is an American country music singer, who I admit I had not heard of, and I think I know a decent amount of some of the mainstream country that's out there right now. But she sang the worst rendition of the national anthem that you will ever hear, and now we have some insight as to maybe why.
That our flag was still there.
Oh, gosh. Oh, make it stop. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mark. I couldn't do any more. Thank you. Well, it turns out Ingrid Andress was drunk. She put out a statement on social media yesterday saying that she is checking herself into a facility today to get the help that I need. That was not me last night. I apologize to Major League Baseball, all the fans, and this country I love so much for that rendition. Now, obviously, if she was drunk and she has a drinking problem, we want her to get well. But I will just say, I've seen some drunk karaoke in my day, and it is from amateur hour singers, and they're still better than what I heard from Ingrid Andress the other night for that national anthem. And I've heard some bad drunk karaoke, John.
I'm cynical. Her thing about going into rehab and then saying, is what, supposed to be fun or super fun?
Yes.
I'm like, what?
Yes. ESPN, of course, left that out of its story that I'm reading here.
Okay.
But yes, she did say at the end of that social media post, it was very glib.
Yeah.
It was like, I hear it's super fun.
That.
I'll let y'all know how rehab is. I hear it's super fun. See, I agree. Some people are saying, like, is she really going to rehab? Is this just like going to hiding for 30 days? But if it turns out that she was faking a rehab stint to go into hiding, then that's just disgusting.
Well, yeah, and I'm not saying she's faking it, but she may have had something to drink. But a lot of times people are drunk because they slur. I mean, she was kind of nailing the words.
Yes.
Enunciation-wise, it was the notes that were horrible.
Well, that's a good point. There was no slurring.
Or giggling. Sometimes you're drunk, you're like, oh, I messed that up.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Just the lack of self-awareness. I think she was trying hard. So I'm a little cynical, but she does need to go away for at least 90 days, and that would cover a stint. So she's going to have to do it.
She's got to go.
You can't.
She cannot show her face anywhere else anytime soon and sing. I mean, you just can't do it. That was horrific on so many levels. So if she truly has a drinking problem, obviously we want her to turn things around. But a part of me is watching that and just saying to myself, I don't know, you just might suck at singing. Because I hear a lot of drunk people sing, or I used to back in the day, like college and whatnot, and they were better singers than she was, and they were a lot drunker, by the way.
Well, band and talent singer management, they don't usually lose track of people, and they're kind of aware of their clients' habits. So, that, hey, this is big, don't screw it up. You got a chance here. You would have thought there would have been a little more protection. That's another reason I'm cynical. I don't know that a good manager would have let her get drunk.
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot to dissect here.
Can I show you just a little bit of one of her regular songs so that we know what she actually sounds like or supposed to?
Okay, I'm fine with that. Sure, Mark, go ahead.
This is a song called Wishful Drinking.
Is it? Okay, Wishful Drinking. Okay, let's go.
Maybe I'm just wishful drinking.
Oh, I've heard this
Give
song.
my heart something to sink in. Better make it to nothing I won't do for another round of me and you.
All right, I've heard that song now that you play it. I had no idea it was her. But it also sounds auto-tuned up the butt.
Yeah, that's tough for live singers to hit.
I mean,
sometimes.
you can just hear it. That's clearly very auto-tuned is what that is. I mean, that sounds nothing like the national anthem the other night. And the Rockets, red glare. Oh, my goodness. John in Topeka. John, go ahead.
The good thing about her singing it this badly is that now anybody else that thinks that they sing badly can listen to that and say, I was way better than that. Even me, with the China virus right now, COVID-19, sickly, can sing better than that. Oh, say, can you see? See? Listen to me. I sound horrible to myself, and my head hurts, and I sound better than her.
Come on, let it rip, John. Thank you. Thank you very much. John, you sound better before 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning than she did prime time in front of millions on television.
Thank you, and I would take your endorsement on any political candidate except for a Democrat.
Well, thank you. I'm not doing that anytime soon, John, but I appreciate your trust in me, buddy.
There was that one part, too, where she sang and she kind of messed up the ending, but then she repeated that same messy ending on the next phrase.
Yeah.
It's kind of what guitar players do. If they mess up, they'll kind of do it again. I meant to do that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, one of those
I
things.
felt there was some of that myself.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, but you're right. Carl Lewis and Roseanne Barr were very happy by that rendition the other night. They were like, all right, we are not the worst. You know, when you Google worst national anthems of all time, they'll still show up, in the top 5 or 10, but they will not be number one. That goes to Ingrid Annis, who totally butchered that anthem the other night, right before the Home Run Derby. Oh, a little Carl Lewis for me here, Mark?
Oh, say, can you see?
Come on, Carl.
By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed.
Hey, Carl sounds like Whitney Houston compared to Ingrid did the other night.
Sounds all right.
Right? I mean, not terrible. Yeah, he's way off the Mount Rushmore of worst national anthems. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a hard song. It's a hard song. But listen, nobody is Gerald Wilson. Major League Baseball, would you take a page out of the NFL's playbook and hire Gerald freaking Wilson here? Okay? Get it done. Let's go. I saw this last night. Hillbilly Elegy Netflix views are up 1,200% since Trump named J.D. Vance as his VP pick. So the Netflix movie came out a couple of years ago, and it was directed by Ron Howard, Glenn Close, Amy Adams, and it got viewed 19.2 million minutes on Monday. On Sunday, the day prior to Vance's pick, it was viewed 1.5 million minutes. So that equates to about 164,000 individual plays for the movie on Monday. Close received her 8th Academy Award nomination for playing Mama, which was Vance's grandmother in the movie. And then Amy Adams took on the role of his mother, Bev. So I've read the book. I've seen the movie. I think the book is better than the movie. But certainly it's a rags to riches, all-American story of J.D. Vance, where this guy grows up in the Rust Belt in, communities that were traditionally very Democratic and have now become, obviously, in large part, the backbone of the working class Donald Trump Republican Party. You can find, communities like J.D. Vance's hometown of Middletown, Ohio, all over the country, including here in Kansas and Missouri. So the book came out at the perfect time in 2016 because the book came out during Donald Trump's rise through politics, where media in New York and L.A. and D.C. didn't understand what was going on. And I read the book around that time just because it was getting all this attention, and it's an outstanding book if you haven't read it, and the movie's pretty good too. But it does give you that insight. I mean, not that a lot of people necessarily need it around here, but it's a great read. And now that he's possibly the next vice president of the United States, it does take you through, how millions in America have been feeling the forgotten man, forgotten woman that Donald Trump did effectively tap into in 2016, has been tapping into for the better part of 8 years. This guy gets raised by his grandmother. His mother's a mess, raised by his grandparents. Joins the military, comes back, goes to college, ends up at Yale Law School, and, the rest is history. Successful business career, venture capitalist, the whole thing, and now at 39, soon to be 40 years old, also the first millennial on any presidential ticket, which is notable as well. I heard just real quick on this front, and then I got the Sarah Sanders story for you. I heard another radio show this week in town that doesn't know what it's talking about. Really just has no idea what it's talking about on so many things. And, they were trying to analyze what happened on Saturday, but we don't get political, meaning they really do. They just don't want, other political opinions. They're like, yeah, we're so sick of the old people in politics. Oh, my gosh, the old people in politics. It's like, and this is after the news had broken that Donald Trump just picked a millennial to be on his ticket. And by the way, look at the RNC this week. You're seeing the future of the party with a lot of young people. J.D. Vance, 39. You have Ron DeSantis, who's maybe 45. Yep, he's 45. Vivek Ramaswamy is 38. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, mother of 3, spoke last night. Governor of Arkansas is 41. And a lot of people thought that Sarah Huckabee Sanders might end up being Donald Trump's running mate, but she's the governor of a state. She's got 3 little kids. That's a big ask. I wondered if that was maybe something that would hold her back, prevent her from doing it. Now, J.D. Vance has 3 little kids as well. So, to each their own. But either way, Sarah Huckabee Sanders had a pretty prominent role yesterday, and she started telling a story that I had heard her tell here in Kansas.
When I was President Trump's White House press secretary, the best job. I got the chance to take my 4-year-old son, Huck, to bring your kid to work day. Much like Jill now drags Joe to bring your husband to work day.
That's pretty good from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And she goes on to tell the story. It took her a couple of minutes to tell it, so I'll paraphrase it here. But she talks about how she brought Huck, her son, to work at the White House when she was the press secretary. And, in front of all these people on the White House lawn, Huck starts running towards Donald Trump. And she's like, oh, no, oh, no, oh, no. And Trump gets down on one knee as if he's going to embrace the kid. Like, hey, come on over here, kid. Come into my arms. And, he's going to give him a big old hug. And he runs right past Trump and right into his mother's arms, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And Trump it's not embarrassing. It's just funny because at 40 years old, you're a kid. You don't care that the most powerful man in the world just bent over to say, hey, kid, what's going on? Let me give you a big old hug. Ran right by the leader of the free world and into his mother's arms. And she told that story at a Kansans for Life event either last year or 2 years ago when I was emceeing it. And she talks about, the strength of mothers, the power of motherhood, and how it's unrivaled in so many respects, even by the President of the United States. And she told that story again last night at the RNC. And it's a funny story. It also humanizes Trump a little bit. And that was, to me, a big part of what they were doing last night in some of these speeches. It was putting a human element to Donald Trump that he doesn't really like to show. But the people that I've talked to who have met him before all will tell you it's absolutely there. And that story by Sarah Huckabee Sanders stood out because when she started telling it, I was like, I heard her tell that story last year right here in Overland Park. And you can find her full speech online. Yesterday was quite a contrast as, America was watching the Republican National Convention, day 2, and the ratings have been really big. Monday's numbers, Fox had 7 million viewers in prime time, which is well over double what they nationally regularly do. And when you stack up all the news networks, you're approaching 20 million people watching Monday night. Haven't seen the ratings from last night yet, but probably on par, maybe a little better. But, I mean, there's nothing in America that gets that kind of viewership anymore outside of NFL playoff games, the Oscars, Grammys. On a good year, on a bad year, it's about half of that. So there's been a lot of attention this week on it. It's really obviously the lead story around the nation and here in Kansas City. But last night, President Biden was speaking to the NAACP, and, he's trying to think of things to do. I get it. Maybe he's now coming to the realization that people are hurting, especially working class, middle class folks are getting crushed by the policies of the last 3 years where, hey, when you import 15 million people, no strings attached, and you print money like it's going out of style, you're going to have some problems. We're seeing that in real time right now in America. So what do? I mean, housing costs are through the roof. Rents are up 30% the last few years. What's the answer? Well, let's roll the tape.
The idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55.
Okay, he misspoke there, by the way. He didn't mean he was going to cap national rent at $55. What he meant to say is that he does not want corporate landlords to be allowed to raise the rent more than 5%. That's the number that he is targeting. Now, what is a corporate landlord? What he means is that this would apply to landlords with more than 50 units, covering more than 20 million units or roughly half the country's rental stock. So now we are going to go, if he has his way on this, full-blown socialism. I can't envision something like this ever passing in Congress, but who knows? I mean, there's a million things the guy's tried to do and bypass Congress on, like bailing out student loans. He tried to do that without any input from Congress. He was told it was illegal by the Supreme Court, and he did it anyway, right? I mean, that's going on right now. Let's not forget that. So I don't know what the goal would be on this and how he would try to achieve this, but heck, why not do it right now? If you know people are hurting, I mean, you're acting like you're not the guy who's sitting in the White House today, which, by the way, he may not remember that on some days, but like, you're the guy who's there, dude. Like, you're the guy in charge. If you can do this today, do it today. What are we waiting for? But anyway, this is, I think, a prime example of what we've seen over the last couple of years. Whereas Joe Biden's reelection prospects grow more dire, his policies are lurching to the left and becoming even more radical. Typically, what you see is like, all right, if I'm struggling, what do? I got to have outreach. You outreach to the middle. And that's what Joe Biden did 4 years ago. Now, I don't think he was selling the truth, but whatever. It worked 4 years ago where he pitched himself as kind of the moderate, steady hand, calm everything down, COVID, Trump, summer of love, all this stuff. He was going to be the calming influence as the guy who had been around politics for 50 years. He was Obama's VP. He was going to calm this all down. And as he's gotten in, he's lurched to the left. And as his reelection prospects grow more dire, his policies have lurched further and further to the left. And this is a prime example of that. I mean, rent control in general just doesn't work. Look at New York City. I looked this up. Nearly half the units in New York City are rent stabilized, and the average one-bedroom apartment costs $4,300 a month. One bedroom, New York City, $4,300 a month. We have some new dopey apartments going up by my house, which, I'll go on that rant another day. But I had my sisters-in-law in town, to see the new baby a few weeks ago. And, they live in that part of the world. And they came out and they were like, whoa, luxury apartment, one bedroom for whatever it was. I don't know, $900, $1,000. Meantime, they're playing like $6,000 for a 2-bedroom shoebox that's really a 1-bedroom where the closet got called a bedroom so they could tack on another couple grand in rent. It's like, it doesn't work. Show me a place where it's worked. California's tried it, fails miserably. New York City has it on half their units. It ain't working there. All you're doing is discouraging people from building because eventually those policies are going to impact them. Right now they're saying it won't impact new units or new builds, but eventually it will. It always does, right? Never ends. Just a matter of time. So you discourage new builds, and then you also say to certain landlords, you know what, they're going to get out of the business. That's not going to work out for them. So it's just another bad idea. And it's the icing on the cake of what have been several bad ideas. The bad idea started a long time ago. And that's why as you sit here and you just look at from afar, you say to yourself, okay, what's the actual plan? Is this going to work? And I don't see how it's going to work. I mean, people have tried to implement and pursue these rent controls here in Kansas City, right? I mean, they've put some pretty extreme policies in place in Kansas City, Missouri. And what has that ended up doing, by the way? It has driven people who were landlords, small mom and pop landlords in this town. It's driven them out. What did they do in Kansas City? What was that, a year ago? While there's no rent control, they did increase the laws to make it much more difficult for small businesses, for mom and pop businesses who might have 1 or 2 rental units that they use for some side income. They're the ones who have gotten hurt by more red tape, by more regulation on some of these new tenant laws in Kansas City. It's hurt them in a big way. So now you step back and you say, what is the answer? How do you increase supply? And when the cost of everything has gone up, from labor to parts to material, it's hard to increase the supply when that's the problem you've got right now. You can't find labor. And on top of that, your material costs are through the roof. You want to build a home here in Kansas City, from what I get told, I mean, if you're not, you can barely break even if you're building a home and then trying to sell it for probably close to $300,000. That's not a starter home for most people. So it put folks in a very tough spot, and living that American dream becomes less feasible. You force them into the rental industry, and those prices have gone up 30% over the last few years. But the answer, as always, is not the government.